For those who have joined in, I would like to just give an introduction that we're doing a webinar on UI UX design today with Shreyas, who's the lead, who's creative partner at Sync Labs. But before we get started, for those who don't know about SoftClay and those who are not students of SoftClay yet, I would request you to download the app if you haven't till now, or visit the website and download the app. And this app can actually let you experience different careers, through role play simulations. So you actually get to experience being a professional in a simulated world, which can give you exposure of what a day in somebody's life looks like, right? That's the idea. Well, while we're waiting for people to join in, I can play some videos related to SoftClay so that you know what it is, right? Give me 1 second. Hopefully the audio was clear. Shreyas, could you hear the audio?
Yeah, it was clear. I could hear.
Okay, let me play number one.
What is going on, guys? And welcome back to Q&A.
Sorry. Well, for those who are looking to understand how the video works, here is another one. Well, this was just a very short video before we start, today's webinar. We'll get started with that. I think we have enough people to get started. Also, if you're looking to, where the app is, I'm just going to present that as well so that you know where to go and, click. Okay, so here is the website link. And here is the app. If you want to scan it or go on the website, you can download the app and start exploring different colors. Well, I'll just put that out in the chat box as well. Before we get started, few rules of the webinar, requesting everybody to please be on mute. So I would request everyone, whoever is in audience, to please be on mute so that we, do not get any, a disturbance from outside. Secondly, you can ask questions. So if you want to ask questions, you can type it down in the chat box, or we will also have the last 20 minutes of the webinar for the Q&A round. So we will do that as well. So either ask your questions at the end, or if you have a question, type it out in the chat box and we will take that forward. You can switch on your cameras if you like, and if you want to keep it off, you can keep it off. But please make sure that you are on mute so that we don't get noise. Okay, great. So let's get started. We have a very talented UI UX designer with us today, Shreyas. Shreyas is also the person who is behind the fabulous SoftClay app, which some of you have been using. So it takes great amount of effort to come up with something that's that creative and amazing, right? So I would let Shreyas just walk us through his professional journey till date and tell us a little bit about himself. Shreyas, over to you.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm very flattered that you guys are interested in what I have to say. Like Swati mentioned, I'll just give you a quick introduction about myself and what I do. So my name is Shreyas. I am the creative partner, co-founder at a company called Sync Labs. So it's me along with three other partners. We've started this company around 2 years ago, and we help design apps, products, brands, and businesses. My journey started, actually, quite honestly, I started design, or I was interested in design pretty late compared to a lot of my peers. Typically, you start making career decisions in like 11th standard or something like that is when you have the rough idea of what you want to do. I was in the final semester of 12th standard when I realized that there is something called design, and I thought, okay, might as well try to give this a shot. And so I luckily I kind of got into a couple of colleges, picked one, went there, and by education I studied product design, so industrial design, which would include the design of physical products, things like things like a remote or things like a smartphone, physical products that you touch, feel, and kind of use. And I realized as I was going through that journey, and as I was learning those things, that wasn't necessarily my interest. And so somewhere in between, I kind of made a switch into UI UX, which is the design of digital products. And I learned to fall in love with that that entire field. And so as soon as I graduated, me along with our three colleagues, we decided that let's try to make a company out of this. Let's try to take our passion for building products and convert that into something that can actually help clients and people who may not know so much about design and learn a little bit more. And so we've been running that successfully, fingers crossed, successfully for 2 years now. I mean, I love what I do, and I'm really excited that I get to share it with more people and hopefully inspire someone else to maybe come down the same path.
Great. Thank you, Shreyas. And for our audiences, right, since we have teenagers, right, UI UX design is designing apps, which Shreyas has talked about. But just to put this into real perspective, any app that you use, right, whether it's Ola, Uber, Swiggy, Zomato, Blinkit, anything, right, that you're using, or WhatsApp, we all use WhatsApp, or YouTube, right? Any app that you use, or any platform that you use, like Amazon, Flipkart, Myntra, Snapdeal, anything is designed first and then coded, right? So when we say, hey, coders are, very much in demand because, all these things need to be coded, equally all these things need to be designed first and then coded, and that's where your UI UX designers come, and that's what Shreyas does, right? So now we'll go into depth of what a day in Shreyas lives look like and all of that. So Shreyas, I'm gonna ask you questions, and like you'll have to give us answers for them. Try and give us more examples from your daily lives. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Great. So let me just go back. Yeah. So what? Since we have discussed what it means to be a UI UX designer, I would love to understand what problems do you solve every day? Like, give us examples of everyday challenges that you come across.
Yeah, so with the company, I'm going to talk a little bit from my perspective, but also the work that I do with the company that we run. We've been doing a lot of work in three major domains. One is something like education technology. So education technology is this entire idea. SoftClay is an education technology product, which is in the field of education. How are you designing solutions? They may be career-oriented solutions. They may be solutions of a different for college applications, things like that. So we've kind of worked a lot in that space in terms of understanding how to take how to understand the space and how do you work in that. So those are, I mean, education technology is one of the space that we work in. Financial technology is another big domain that we've actually spent a lot of time in. Financial tech products are things like Google Pay, Paytm, right? So these are products that are associated with finances. There are some personal finance products. There are some finance management products. I don't want to get too much into the jargons, but essentially understanding how people understand and deal with money, and how do you design digital or physical products that sort of associated with that is something that we the final problem is sustainability. Now, these are domains that we work on. The work that we actually do as a UI UX designer in all of these can involve really small things, or they can involve really big problems, right? And I think as we keep talking, we can maybe get a little bit into what those actually I think look like. But we've been very invested, and I think as designers, one of the first problems or one of the first requirements that anyone always needs to have is you need to have a fundamental understanding of who you're solving your problems for, right? And so there was something that I read a long time ago, and I really liked it. And it said that the first step to solving any problem is acknowledging that there is one. And so a big part of our job actually involves understanding what problems are actually deserve to be solved, and that takes up a big part of our day.
Shreyas, if I ask you an example, right? So you designed the SoftClay app,
Yeah.
right? You take that as an example. I would say the first step was to just, work, and you and I work together on it. So the first step was to just go out and understand from students and from teenagers what they're looking for, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you were thinking of designing, let's say when you thought of designing the challenges and the explore part of the SoftClay app, right?
Yeah.
What were the I would say, what were the things or the constraints that were kept in mind before you could say, hey, this button goes here, this color comes here, and hey, we are going to use blue and not really yellow? Like, how do you make those decisions? Is my
Yeah,
question.
I think a lot of that has to happen by understanding who is going to be using the product. So a lot of our discussions always revolved around the fact that you and I are not really the people that are using the products. The people that are using the products are children. And so you need to understand what are the apps children themselves are actually using. Apps like Instagram and Duolingo and things like that. Those are the apps that they use. And so we use that as one benchmark in terms of understanding what these guys are used to and what they understand. And the second part of it comes in terms of our discussions where we want to figure out, you know what, this feature in the app, the challenges feature of the app is a really important feature, and we really want people to sort of experience that feature because that's how they understand, how these different careers are working, right? And so how are you designing a button to ensure that they can actually see that? I can give you a very simple example of how we used to try to do that. We had this really silly way of assessing designs where we used to squint our eyes a little and look at the phone, And if the thing that's highlighted, when you squint your eyes and you can't really read the word, but if you can visually just see what needs to be highlighted, and if that's able to lead you to the place where you want people to go, like if you want them to go to challenges, then you know that you've kind of had a successful design, right? And so that squinty eyes rule, and there are a whole bunch of these silly other ways that you can really just try to figure things out. But the goal is always think about who you're designing for, think about what you want them to see, and then figure out how you're going to get them to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And to add on to what you are saying, so if you look at any successful apps today, right? Why WhatsApp is the default messaging service when there were so many other messaging
Yeah.
services, right? And the reason for that is because the design and the easyability from the user's perspective is very high. So that is why
Hmm.
every adopted WhatsApp, and there were other complicated messaging apps. Or if you just compare the SMS UI UX design and your WhatsApp UI UX design, why are we not messaging each other on SMSs? The
Right.
reason is because WhatsApp user interface and user experience is
Yeah.
much better.
Yeah.
So I would request teenagers to go back, try out some of these competing apps, like you try out Big Basket and Blinkit together, and you see which one feels better, and probably that company has a better UI UX team. Or you try Ola and Uber and see which one has what features. And you will know, you'll start noticing these tiny details of how UI UX designer put in a lot of effort to make it much more convenient for the user, and where the buttons are easy to figure out. Like if you download an app and you know what to do with it, I think the UI team has done a great job. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Absolutely.
the idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question, which is how is designing apps different from other design fields?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think there are a lot of similarities, but we have to talk about the differences as well. Um, I can give you a great example in terms of what we used to study in what I learned in college was designing like physical products, right? So designing a remote or designing a phone and things like that. It all starts fundamentally from the same place, which is fundamentally from trying to understand who you're designing for and what problems you're trying to solve. Where UI UX comes, or where designing apps is a little different, is you have to get into a lot more minutia in terms of the detailing and what you want them to see, what you want them to click. Uh, there is a lot of logical reasoning that has to happen in terms of understanding what people are going to click first, and then what is the second thing they're going to click, and what is the third thing they're going to click. You have to balance it out with trying to understand, who is, what are you trying to push, what feature are you trying to push. For example, if challenges wasn't something in SoftClay app, I keep referencing SoftClay because I feel like that's what everyone will probably be familiar to. But in the SoftClay app, for example, if we wanted to say that, challenges are a very small feature that we don't want anyone to see, then it wouldn't have been the front and center big button that kind of sits above everything, right? And so those are the kind of details that you have to start taking into account when you're when you're looking at these apps and how you're trying to design them. Because it all fundamentally comes down to how well do you understand how people are behaving, like how you make sure that they're doing the things that we make assumptions that, oh, when you see this button, it's very obvious that you want to click this button, but it's not as obvious because not as many people kind of think about things the same way we do. And so it gets really interesting, and you have to go out and talk to people a lot more in this field. There's a lot more testing that happens in this field. Um, but yeah. So and I think you've also seen this with SoftClay, how much you actually have to go out and talk to people, ask them what they think about what you've made.
Yeah.
So it's a very dynamic, fast-moving field that constantly requires change, constantly have to cater to the needs of the people that you're trying to design.
Correct. And for everybody's perspective, right? Design is a very vast field, right? So you have interior design where people design homes. You have fashion design where people, or fashion luxury accessories where people design clothes, accessories, and whatever kind of you wear, or today's spectacles also that comes in accessories. And then you have product design where you design physical products like a chair or a table or a laptop or a phone, right? And then you have UI UX design. Now, in my experience, I would say UI UX design is very, very different because it's a combination of logical abilities and creative abilities. Whereas I would say other design fields are more skewed towards the creative side. I mean, when you're designing a dress, you're just designing a dress. But when you're designing an app, you're actually thinking about how the user is going to click, whether the user is going to understand what needs to be done, and whether the eye is going to go to the button that I want the user to click.
Yeah.
Right? So, an example that I read when I was reading about Uber's success. Uber was successful despite not being the first one in the market because when you book a Uber cab, you're actually able to see the cab moving, right? And that kept the user engaged and they didn't feel that they were waiting for 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that feature kind of helped Uber.
Yeah, and I think kind of adding to what you were saying is I think the UI UX as a field is um, something that has to happen much more in collaboration with other fields. So UI UX designers and engineers work very closely with each other, and not many other design fields. They do have to work in collaboration with other fields, but I think UI UX more than anything else has to work in collaboration with not only the not only the engineering team, but you also have to work with like the business team. Because yeah, I mean, because so it's not just about your personal preferences and what you think looks good and what you think doesn't look good. It's very much dependent on who you're making it for, and so it's a very involved process, and it requires a lot of different types of professionals that need to be working in collaboration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. And tell us a challenging situation, I would say, that you faced somewhere where, so you work a lot with clients, right, Shiraz?
Yeah.
So my question is more around where you face that, hey, client is telling me something else, the customer is telling me something else, and I think I need to be delivering this. And I'm sure it happens with clients. So tell us a situation like that.
Yeah. So clients के साथ तो argument दिन रात होती ही रहता है about what we think is right versus what they think is right. Eventually, both of us the convergence always happens to say that if we can't ever meet a solution where like okay, we're just going to go out and get it tested. And so I can give you a very simple example where we designed this app for a client in Dubai. It was an education tech product, and it had a whole lot of features. So the app, I can tell you, it was about when you're applying to colleges, you go onto this and you input all this information about. You input your SOP, you input your grades, you input all of these different things. And what happens is that someone really likes what you've written, and if they like your profile, they're going to provide you a scholarship. So it was basically how you get to go into college. And so uske liye we designed an app. When we were designing this app, there were again a whole lot of different features that we wanted to design for. And the client was very, very adamant that all of those features should sit right on top next to the logo on the app, okay, towards the top of the phone. And we were trying to tell him that this is not a good idea. This is not how things are supposed to work. But he was just like, no, it has to be this way, because that's all he had seen. And so what we did was we're like, okay, let's go out and get this tested. And so we took that app and we showed it to 20 people. And we're like, okay, try using this and try opening. There was a feature called the upload your resume, right? So we just asked them to go out and try to find the resume feature. And so many people just struggled. It took them so long just to be able to find that feature. And when we went back and we studied why that was happening, there's a very simple reason. So if I take my phone, okay, what's happening with smartphones nowadays is that they're becoming so long that when you try to hold your smartphone with one hand, your thumb actually can't reach the top of the phone anymore. And so if you look at the way apps and products, a lot of products are being designed. So if you look at Instagram, if you look at Twitter, if you look at Snapchat, a lot of these apps that are being designed today, all the buttons and all the navigation is towards the bottom of the screen. Because that is the way phones have started to be started getting designed so that your hand can easily reach those buttons and you don't have to use two hands to try to reach that button which is in the top screen, right? And so these are the kind of solutions that you have to start thinking about. These are the problems that you have to start considering when designing apps. And that's something that, I mean, that was a problem that we faced. That was, I mean, we were finally able to convince the client that the solution that we originally presented made sense, but you had to present it in the through the lens of the customer को समझ में नहीं आ रहा है कि what you're doing, so then we have to change the way they're solving the problem.
Yeah, so I think your job is less intuition oriented and more
Yeah.
research data oriented, so that you can kind of see what works in the market and how the user
Yeah,
behaves.
yeah, but I would also say that some level of intuition is required. Like you still need to have a basic understanding. I think we live in such a digital world, right? Everyone is spending so much time on their phones and on their computers and this and that. Is that almost everyone has a basic understanding of how a lot of these apps look, feel, and work like, right? So, and I think that that basic intuition does have to come to set in the initial sort of the initial structure, and then that structure keeps getting changed. You have to be accepting of the fact that that structure is going to change, and you don't know the answer to everything. It's very important.
Okay, what skill set do you use in your role?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different things. So there are some hard skills that you need, and there are some soft skills that you need, right? The hard skills being very simply, you need to know how to make things look good, right? Just because you figured out logically, okay, इस step के बाद ये step आता है, and then after this step, people are going to this step, doesn't mean that you made an app that's going to be your next $1 billion product, right? It's very important to also understand how you're going to make those things look good. How are you using the right colors? How are you using the right softwares? You don't want to make a button that's half the screen size. So you need to know what is the right size of a button that you're using. How big is the card? What images are you selecting for, different, for example, SoftClay. We had a lot of discussions about what images we need to be picking up for every single career, right? So these are kind of the hard skills that you need to be able to understand in terms of saying that, whatever you make needs to be aesthetically appealing. And there are a lot of different softwares, and we've always said this, like YouTube and TikTok and all of these are like the biggest source of learning. Coursera, Skillshare, there are so many platforms where you can learn these things nowadays. But those are hard skills. There are also a lot of soft skills that you need. We've discussed this just before, which is about going out and being able to talk to people, understanding what problem they're facing. Right? We always say this, that we don't want to be the kind of designers that claim to have a solution for a problem without first understanding what the actual problem is, right? And so having that intuitive ability to go out and talk to people, figure out what they like, what they don't like, what's working, what isn't working, just having that general curiosity of, oh, this is a problem and I'm really excited to solve it. Is, I think, is a very important soft skill if you want to be successful in the field.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree with you. I think this is one of those fields where you need all the hard skills and the soft skills combined together. You need to be, as you said, you need to be artistic. You need to have that creative bent of mind to understand colors, sizes, shapes, what looks good on the phone. But at the same time, you need to be logical enough to understand that, hey, it's not just about the design, it's also about the functionality of the app, psychology. I think those people who love psychology, and I've had a lot of students who ask me, psychology padke, what are the options?
Yeah,
this is one of the options, right?
Absolutely.
You need to understand how human mind thinks, and that gets applied in your
Absolutely. I mean, we've had so many people that have helped us who were psychologists. Like they come in and they just given a very interesting perspective of it's not like it can go into like very specific and smaller things, but there's also a broader level understanding that psychologists can bring to the table, and it's a very important field. Again, I psychology is a term, but I like to think that design more than anything is a very human field. Like you really have to understand human beings, and it's just, I think UI/UX is like a beautiful blend of every single field that needs to come in to make like a successful solution. So I think it's great. Like the soft skills that are required for this field are just endless, but it can still be done by anyone.
I see. So, what are the must-haves for someone in this role? Like, you can't live without it.
I think the soft skills that we spoke about are genuinely must-haves. Like I've seen a lot of people that have designed things based on personal preferences and what they like and what they think is good. It's really not how it
Yeah.
works at all. You can do that for a college project, but when you go out and design products that people are actually going to use and are going to make an impact on their life, it's not about you. You need to be thinking about other people. And so having that curiosity and drive to go out and talk to people, ask them, what their problem is I think a must have. Um, I think skill is a fairly important, like the ability to make things look aesthetic is always an important uh, is always an important ability to have. And so developing that, I think, is okay. I think a lot of people worry about, oh, I'm not good at drawing, I maybe can't do this. But drawing and any other skill like that is something that can be developed, right? It just takes some time and practice. For example, like I can tell you, when I started out design, uh, when it was my first day of college, and I didn't know anything about drawing, right? Just no drawing, nothing. I didn't know anything. And when I went into college, I also made the assumption that a lot of people would be like me, who just didn't know anything. And the first day came and we had this assignment where we had to draw these straight lines. The first assignment is, without using a scale, how do you draw a straight line across a sheet of paper? Okay, it's as simple as that. And मेरा line ऐसे zigzag wavy कैसे भी जा रहा है, and I was like, okay, I'm not worried because everyone else might be the same, right? But I was looking around me and everyone was like talk talk talk. It's like they had an invisible scale and they were just drawing these beautiful straight lines, and I was so worried then that maybe this isn't for me. I was like, oh man, this is the first day, have I already made a mistake, right? But I look back at that today and I'm like, yeah, I just spent time and I kind of built up that skill, and now I'm completely okay with it, right? So I think that's a skill that you need to have, but if you don't have it right now, it's not a deal breaker in any sense. But the third skill that I think is really important, and we discussed this again, is logical reasoning. You really need to be able to understand A to B कैसे पहुंच रहा है, and which is more important. Is A more important, or is feature B more important? How are you prioritizing? And so just that logical understanding of how the app is going to work, flow, and move is a very important skill to have.
No, when you say that, that reminds me of the brand Apple, right? Where we always, talk about a brand that follows user-centric design.
Yeah,
That's Apple, right? So you can't just add on features, but you need to be able to say what is the most important feature I'm giving, and how can I make it very simple and easy to use so that it's very intuitive for
yeah,
customer to just use it. And I know people who use the Apple ecosystem and iPhones and iPads.
yeah,
Swear by it, right? They can't switch to anything else because it's so designed in a user app.
yeah, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Apple is an interesting case study, that they do something so well, and then there are some things that are just. It's a different. I think that's just a different conversation that we
Yeah.
should.
Okay. So Shiv, what does the day in your life look like? Like if you were to just talk about, morning till evening, what does it look like?
Okay. So a day in my life is constantly changing. Like I don't have a fixed schedule as such. I mean, I have working hours, but in those working hours, things are constantly changing. So for us, I like to break it down into like two simple things. And as a business, we always the four co-founders of Sync. We like to think of it as you're working in the business and you're working on the business. So when you're working in the business, what that means is you're an employee of Sync Labs, right? And so as an employee of Sync Labs, there are certain clients that Sync Labs has, and you have to work for them, right? So a majority part of our day goes into designing, working for our clients and creating those solutions, discussing, having arguments, झगड़े चल रहे हैं, ये हो रहा है, वो हो रहा है with them. And then there's the second half of the day, which we typically like to carve out a part of every day where we're working on the business, and that is specifically to the four co-founders because we are now the owners of Sync Labs, right? So it's our responsibility to ensure that the company as a whole is moving forward. So that involves, just what is our marketing looking like? Are we putting our message out there enough? Are we talking to more people? Things like that, right? So we typically tend to carve out our day into these two halves. My day starts at like 9:30, and it can go on till I can either end my day at 7:30, or I can keep working till 4 o'clock in the morning, right? So
No,
it's
I know having calls at 11 p.m. with
yeah,
you.
yeah,
Click
yeah.
this button, yeah.
Yeah, right. And I think it's just the startup life which is really hectic. Keeps you very busy, keeps you on your toes all the time. And we think that there's time to relax. And we were talking to, we all had an internal discussion a couple of days ago where the client work for us had kind of started wrapping up for all of our projects. And so we were like, oh, maybe it's time to relax. And then we started talking about the things that we can do. And at the end of that conversation, we were like, oh my God, there's so much work, it doesn't end. Right? So से काम निकालने जाओ तो इतना निकलता है but
That's also because you own your business. But I just talk about, if I talk about a normal UI UX designer who's working at a company and not owning the business, I would say it is more on the user research, designing the app, and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a UI UX designer, so my role as a UI UX designer, the clients that I work with over there, the work typically revolves around any feature or solution that we kind of design and build. We kind of break it down into a few steps. So the first step is always trying to sort of really drilling down and defining what the problem is going to be, right? So you really want to define, okay, what are we trying to solve here with what we're trying to do? And what we try to do is that problem statement that we have, we kind of write it and we stick it on a wall so that whatever you're designing, you always look back at that wall and you're like, oh, this is what we have to do. So you keep that in mind, right? So we stick that on the wall and we first define that problem. And then we start designing these low-level, what we call wireframes. So wireframes are just like regular boxes. So I'll make one rectangle and I'll say that this rectangle is the phone. And this rectangle, I'll make a smaller rectangle and say this rectangle is my button, right? So you do this very low level, very basic level of just understanding of what the flow is going to be, right? And then we move into designing the actual, we add the colors, we add, all the icons, we add the text that's going to go into the buttons, the content that's actually going to the screen, things like that. So we start getting into that after that, right? So in our day, it doesn't all happen in one day. Obviously, it kind of gets stretched out over what needs to happen. But in a day, we can do like one sprint where we're in 2 hours, we're starting right from scratch all the way to designing an entire app, or we can really spend out a lot of time. We've been doing projects that have been running for an entire year, where we're just really drilling down on the product and what we're trying to do. And the same thing that maybe we could have done in a day, we can also do in a year if we really sort of.
Yeah, it depends on the scope, the
It
project.
really does, yeah.
Okay, fair. How does a role for any UI UX designer? I'm going to talk about somebody who's working in a company and not running their own company. So how would the role of a UI UX designer, a junior UI UX designer, evolve to become senior in a company?
Yeah. So designers, I think your role would evolve with your understanding of how well you're really approaching the problem and how well you're considering all the different kind of stakeholders that are involved in making the solution, right? So how well are you able to understand what the engineering team is saying? How well are you able to understand what the business team is trying to tell you? Like engineering, you can cook up this really nice idea, and then you go to the engineering team and they're just going to be like, what? I don't know how to actually code this into existence, right? And so you have to scale back. And your role will kind of evolve in terms of how well you're able to juggle between all of these things to say that, oh, this is a really creative solution, but the engineering team can also actually code this into existence. It's not something that will that's only possible.
So you're saying that from just being a designer, as a senior person, you have to take the whole product into account and
Yeah,
say that what I'm designing, can that be actually executed by the engineering team, and can somebody actually code
yeah,
all the designs that I'm giving? Is that
yeah,
feasible? And
yeah,
I think other role would also be to train the junior designers under you, right? So
yeah,
you'll be managing more and more people under you and probably guiding them as to
yeah.
how to conduct the user research, how to design apps, what are the best practices. Now, like when I was working with you, I learned about a lot of best practices saying that, hey, whatever you want the person to go and click, that should be brighter than, other things. And whatever you want to hide, just make it in the light gray color.
Yeah.
So all those best
Yeah,
practices.
absolutely. So it's about evolving your understanding about the field, and I think that comes with practice. You're not just going to get these things right off the bat. You're going to learn about them slowly, and that's really going to help in your job. The engineering team is, I mean, one thing that we spoke about, and I keep coming back to this, and I'm sorry if it's getting a little repetitive, but it's really, again, it comes back to the customer, right? And so you're going to move much faster if you're going to be able to evolve and solve actual genuine problems that are helping people, right? And so it also very much depends on your ability to do that. I think it's also important, like we're talking while we're on this subject. I think it's also kind of important to maybe take a step back, and as from a junior designer to a senior designer is, I think, a conversation that's very important to have. But I also want to maybe just talk about the scope of the field itself. Everything we do nowadays is like a digital product. So everything we interact with everywhere. We're always on our phone. We're on Swiggy. We're on Zomato. We're on Instagram. We're on all of these apps. Even in our car, the dashboard that we have is
Yeah.
done by a UI UX designer, right? So even understanding that is really important. I think the field is like really growing. It's really massive, especially if you look at all the trends that we're moving towards, where we have these AR VR technology, augmented reality, virtual
The
reality.
metaverse of tomorrow.
Yes, the metaverse, right? The metaverse is this big thing that everyone is talking about, and all of that is actually going to be enabled by UI UX designers,
Correct.
because it's our ability to understand how people are interacting with a digital medium, right? And
Yeah.
that's exactly what all of these technologies are about. And so I think there is a massive scope, and there is a big need for UI UX designers, and they're going to play a very important role in making sure that the technological requirements of the future are successful, right? Not just, yeah. So I think there's a massive scope for this role, and the more people that actually come is the better.
Got it. Great. So my one last question, right? So how did you decide that you wanted to be a UI UX designer?
Yeah.
And then how can our teens experience the life of a UX designer?
Our teens can experience the life of a designer through the SoftClay. No.
That is the right answer. They go on the software and click on UI UX design. And
Yeah. No. But talking about myself first, I I got into UI UX design. I'm honestly not sure how. Like, I got into product design, the same way I got into UI UX design, because I saw it and I thought it was really interesting. One thing that I liked about UI UX design is that solutions are much more fast paced. So you can really quickly build out something, test it out, and it might just be a success. It might not be a success. It's very fast. How teens can experience the life of the UI UX designer, I think there are a lot of courses that you can do. But one of the things that I think really might be interesting is, I think, just self reflect. Every time you're using any app, like when you open WhatsApp, when you open Instagram, if you can just spend a second just thinking about what the person who made this was trying to do for you, right? So just why did, for example, Instagram has something called the infinite scroll, right? The infinite scroll is, it's just constantly scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Instagram doesn't have a bottom limit, right? It's just going to keep going, right? So why were they trying to do that? Because they didn't want you to close the app, right? So it was very important for them to design a feature that kept people engaged and hooked onto the Instagram app. right? So when you're interacting with any of these apps, it doesn't matter how old or young you are. If you just take a second to stop and reflect on what the person who was designing this was trying to do for you, like what buttons are you seeing front and center, what is not being highlighted, what is, what colors are different, are all the colors good, do you like the colors, do you not like the colors? Maybe you can try the squinty rule test, right? Like, all right, just squint your eyes a little and see what's being highlighted, right? It just helps you gauge what apps have worked, why they have worked. And I think that just starts as early as possible. I mean, as a teenager, if you can start doing that, I mean, that'll be amazing. That you already have an understanding of, these little details that take other people a long time to learn. And I think that's a very simple way of just getting into the field, and that might help sort of figure out if this is interesting to you or not.
Got it. No, Shreyas, I think that is super helpful. Now, what since we are running short on time, I'm gonna open the floor for Q&A, right? So for those people who joined a little late, this is a webinar on UI UX design organized by SoftClay, which is an app that lets you experience different careers. I have through real life simulations. I have already put in the link of the app in the chat box. I will also be presenting the website link and a QR code on the screen. But I would request all of you to keep the questions going in, right? So you have heard Shreyas, you've heard me about our experiences in the field of UI UX design. If there are any questions, right, on anything that you want to ask Shreyas about UI UX design, please unmute yourself or ask the question, or put it out in the chat box and we will answer that question. What's your favorite and most used language in your profession?
So we're a mix between English and Hindi. So whatever is convenient for us, for the client, is pretty cool. And I tell you, I was born and brought up in Bangalore. Yeah, so I spent a lot of very English medium. So what language?
So if you're asking computer language, is that the question?
Oh, computer language. Okay. So, look, as designers, we don't have to interact with the
Computer languages. So design is all about design.
Yeah. Okay. So, computers, yeah, but the designer, sorry, the engineering teams that we typically work with, HTML, CSS, JavaScript are three of the most basics that you can learn to get into the field of actually developing the app, because that's a lot of front end. But there is another software that's becoming very popular called Python, right? So Python is something that is an industry-wide accepted language that people use to.
Yeah, but I really want to clarify that, Shreyas, that UI UX designers do not use a computer language.
Correct.
So if you are interested in the field of design, right, if you're creative and you like expressing and you think that, yeah, I like the field of creativity and you're thinking of going into design, the UI UX designers are going to design websites and apps. So they do not code it. After that, they give it to computer engineers who then code the app, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely.
Shreyas doesn't use any language.
Yeah, I don't. I have a basic understanding. It's not a requirement. I have a basic understanding out of interest, and also it's a good to have. If you know how to code, it's good, because even though you're not the one who's actually physically going to do it, you can always talk better to the engineering team, right? They'll be able to understand much more easier. But again, like even Swati mentioned, it's not your job to actually code the app into existence. There is an engineer who will help you do it. So yeah, that's about it.
Any other questions, guys? It's always the difficult one, to ask the first question.
Yeah.
But
thanks for that. Please don't call me sir also. I'm not.
Yeah, Shreyas is very young. He's probably your age.
Yeah. Please don't. I'm not a sir. Not yet.
Okay, let me ask you a question while people are thinking what question to ask you. When was the first time you decided that, hey, you know what, I'm gonna be in the field of UI UX design? And like, how did you get that enlightenment?
The first time was actually, so when I was in college, there was a product that we were working on. It was a soil moisture sensor. Okay? And so the way it worked was that you put that soil moisture sensor in a pot, and it would tell you how much moisture level was in the pot, right? So it was to help people in Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad mein itni garmi hai that very few plants actually survive. And most people don't really know how much water to give and what to give, right? So the first time when we were actually designing that product, there was a small app that we had to create with that product, and that app actually involved. So basically, that soil moisture sensor would connect to your phone, and it would tell you on your phone how much moisture level your plant needed, and accordingly, it would give you a reminder कि चलो भाई आज तो पानी दे दो, right?
Huh.
So it was when we made that very small app that we had to design that I realized that I had more fun designing the app than I did actually designing that sensor and making all of that come to life.
Yeah.
And uske baad I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And then all the college projects that we did after that, I always try to work on the app side of things of the solution. And then that's how it kind of took off. Even when we got into, when we set up Sync Labs, the kind of projects that we got were like app-based projects. And so that also kind of just helped solidify what I liked about the field. And so, yeah, I mean, it started with a very small thing, and then now it's basically my livelihood. So,
Got it. So I think the spark always comes when you know, do something and you realize that you're happy and you're loving doing that, and then you say, "Hey, this is the field I'm gonna go into." I'm gonna use that example to plug in the SoftClay, right? So what we want to do here is also that you get a gist of what each career is, and that's why I think it's absolutely essential for teenagers to just go on the app and just try and do different things on the app, right? And if you like something, then you use that to go into detail, and as Shreyas is saying, do the projects or do something else. But if you don't give yourself that exposure of doing different things, you will not even know what all is there to offer and what is it that you would like to do in future, right? So that's what I keep telling everybody, that hey, providing exposure to yourself is absolutely important.
yeah.
Now the question Agraj is asking, how to choose between software designing and coding.
Can you explain what you mean by software designing? Like,
So
what
he's
are
asking about your field. So
okay,
designing
okay.
the
So what
app
I
or
do,
coding the app. So how should you choose whether you should be a coder or a designer is what he's asking.
I think that's really a matter of personal preference, right? I can't make that decision for you. It's what makes you happier in terms of, you have to think about what you're going to be doing for the next, what you're, doing for the next 15, 20 years. And there are pros and cons to being an engineer, and there are pros and cons to being a UI UX designer. But those pros and cons, I can't speak to the pros and cons of being an engineer. I only speak to the pros
I'm an
and
engineer. I can talk about the
yeah,
pros and cons
right.
of
So
coding.
maybe like you can add on to this a little better than I can.
Yeah.
What
No,
you choose?
yeah, no, so to just give an answer, Agraj, in short, right, if you really like math, if you really like physics, right, then absolutely go for engineering or coding, right? But if you really like, let's say, creative things,
Creative
right,
thing.
colors, and you find yourself designing things, and you know, like let's say you take waste things and create it into a showpiece for your living room, right? So if you have that creative bent of mind, then absolutely be a designer, right? So I think it's very, very easy what you know to figure out what your heart wants and then go in one of those.
Yeah.
Now, Pallavi is asking, can this career be simultaneously taken up with other career? I can take that, Shreya. So,
Yeah.
Pallavi, you can absolutely do that. But if you are asking me, the answer is probably no, right? So, whatever career you take, and to be successful in that, you need to work really hard for it. You need to give your blood, sweat, soul, everything to that career if you want to be a successful person, right? Now, when you think of being in two boats, that usually doesn't work out. And given that UI UX design is such an interesting and upcoming and highly paid career, right? That one should not be thinking कि यार ये मेरा backup है पर मैं ना engineer बन जाता हूँ या कुछ और कर लेता हूँ. The kind of opportunities that exist in UI UX design, it cannot be a backup option. It has to be the front option. Because yeah, it's one of the most highly paid jobs. I have worked with UI UX designers.
You paid them.
It's earn a lot levels, and there is a lot of supply constraint. I mean, to find Shreyas to work on our app, we like had to meet a lot of designers, and I can tell you, not everybody who's a UI UX designer is super good, right? So there is a supply gap in the market, and if you think you're a good designer, you should take it as your main job and not a backup option.
Yeah.
Sahib is asking if I have 4 years of graphic designing experience and I've just started UI UX course from Coursera and started liking it. Will it be worth it doing UI UX design course? Shares.
So, two things is from a career standpoint, UI UX versus graphics. From what I've experienced, I take this up two ways because you already have 4 years of experience. You know that there is a pay gap. UI UX designers are earning a lot, right? So what Swati mentioned as well, because of the second reason is that there is a very ready and immediate demand and need for UI UX designers, right? Everyone is building digital products and digital solutions today. And so I think it's a very good career decision that you can make within the design field itself. I would also, I mean, so from a purely career standpoint, yes, I think it makes a lot of sense because there is a demand for the career not only now but also for the next at least 30 to 40 years easily. Apart from that, there is a financial side of that, which is you're going to be earning as well. It's a easily understandable field for non-designers, and so there is a market for it. But I would always, I mean, we always pair it with the third field, right? Which is if it's in your interest. You mentioned that you enjoy doing it, and if that's the case, then I think you should absolutely continue going for it. But if you're going to be miserable doing the work, I don't think you should do it just because it kind of pays more. I think you need to also have some amount of interest and liking for the work that you're doing for it to be a long term solution. So yes, I think like if you're liking the work, then UI UX is definitely a field that can keep you going for a long time.
How to start this
How
career?
to start. So like I said, there are a couple of different things that you can do. I think the first is always without having to go out and take a course or anything like that. You can just start observing day-to-day apps that you interact with. Just start looking at WhatsApp, start looking at Instagram, Snapchat, any app that you actually use. Just start looking at it a little closely and start trying to figure out what they were doing, how they were trying to do it, what button did they make really big. If they made one button really big or they changed the color, why did they change the color? There was a very specific reason that they kind of decided to do that, right? So just start asking yourselves these questions, I think, is the first step that you can potentially take. And then I think there are countless number of courses that you can find for free, or you can pay for them on apps like Coursera, or you can explore them through SoftClay and things like that. But you can go on YouTube and you can just look at UI UX designers and things like that. I learned UI UX design completely on YouTube because my college, I wasn't in the UI UX design field in college, right? So I was learning how to build physical products. Everything that I've learned about UI UX, I've learned from YouTube. And so that is
Are you a school student? Well, if you could tell us, are you a school student or are you already in college or working? You're a school. Okay, so yeah, then she can go for a design degree, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can start with that if it's interesting for you. Then a design degree is the next step and things like that. But yeah, it's all about how you're gauging interest, and there are some small steps that you can do to just figure out whether or not this is interesting for you. SoftClay being one way of doing that, going on YouTube, looking at what these guys are doing, trying to just maybe design an app yourself could be another very small thing of small way
Correct,
of
but
doing.
if I were to just answer the question very tactically, Shreyas, I think what the question and the answer should be is, if you really look, if you've made up your mind that you want to be a UI UX designer, and if you're in school, then yes, there are design colleges in India. The best one is National Institute of Design. Shreyas, what is the college that you went to? That's also good.
I went to the college next to it. It's called United World Institute of Design.
United World School of Design, right?
Institute of Design, UID.
Institute, yeah. So UID, absolutely, another great colleges, and there is a whole list of the topmost colleges in design on the SoftClay app again, right? So you can just look at those, but you'll have to prepare for entrances. So your 11th and 12th will go in preparing the for the entrance exams of these colleges. Now there are test prep that you can do for design. Again, those courses, if you're looking to have the test prep courses, again on the app there are test prep courses that you can take right in your reward section. So go to the app, see the courses that you can take, go to the see the colleges that you can go to, and basically you need to prepare for your NID exam or your UC to be able to clear these design entrances. And yeah, and then you have to get a degree in design and then specialization in UI UX design if your college offers that.
Yeah, there are a lot of different colleges now, especially even now. I mean, design is a field that's picking up so much. There are a lot of colleges that are offering very specialized courses in UI UX, in interaction design, in experience design, in service design. I mean, once you start getting into the actual fields that are there, it's kind of an endless journey. But yeah, I think it's a very accessible course. A lot of colleges are offering it. A lot of courses are available if you want to not commit to a college. So I think there are different things that can be taken.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. If there are any more questions, guys, you can ask. We are around. And if you want to, if I have said enough about that, all answers exist on the app. So I've given the link as well if you want to try it out. But courses, colleges, what each profession looks like, what are the different simulations, it's all there. Try it out, and if there are any questions, you can also contact the support number as well, but we'll keep answering the questions meanwhile. There's a question of, I'm in class 12 but I've still no idea what to do. I know intermediate Python and SQL, so can you suggest some related field? I'm not very creative. Okay, great. So I'm an engineer here, so I'll take that up. So if you are already into the computer languages, I think the best option for you is to either study computer engineering or do a bachelor's in computer application, which is called BCA these days. A lot of colleges provide that. I think one of these two options is great for you. So take the engineering entrance exam or the CUET, right? And then yeah, go to a college which has either the bachelor's in computer applications or a BTech in computer engineering, and then build on to your coding skills from there. Yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, and I add on to that, what I've seen from experience is that there are a lot of people who are engineers who do their bachelor's in engineering, and then for masters they decide to pick up a more creative field like UI UX, right? And so they kind of say that, okay, I want to set up a base in engineering, like you said, in Python and SQL, and then I'll figure out how to use those in a more creative format. So that is, I've also seen people do that. So if that's also, I mean, that's also another way of approaching things. Will I need good rank in engineering entrances?
Okay, so Uz, if that's the name, right? I think we can take all of this really offline, right? So
Yeah.
you can look up I think you need a proper half an hour career guidance session. So we can, our team will call you if you can just register on the app or call the contact center. And what we can do is set up a counseling session for you where you can get all your engineering related answers, because the audience here is more design related, so I don't want to take up their time. But yeah, Diksha, if you're on the call, can you just okay, I'm gonna put our support center email ID, guys, on the chat box, and you can reach out to us, and from there we can set up your guidance sessions if you're looking for that. Okay, any other design related questions? Okay, if not, I think what we will do is we're going to send all of you a feedback form. And if you fill that, you'll also get your certificates. So our team will reach out to you and send you the feedback forms on the WhatsApp, and you'll get your certificates post that as well. And in case there are any more questions, I have given you the email ID on which you can reach out to and write to us, or you already have WhatsApp from our support team and you can reply back to that. And then third is, if you want to try the app and experience more careers on your own. So if you want to understand what UI UX designers or what different fields of designs are, go to the SoftClay app on your phone, download it, scan the QR code, or use the link on the website, which is www.softclay.in, and try different careers yourself. And then we can talk more about it has different colleges, it has different courses, all of that. Okay, last question, because I know we are already running out of time. Sahib is asking, what made you choose UI UX?
Yeah, so like I said, right, for me, the switch happened when I was designing that soil moisture sensor, and there was a small part that was an app that was a part of it. And no one really taught us, no one in college, because our professors were all industrial design professors. So no one really taught us how to design that app. And so we kind of learned ourselves, and we went on YouTube. We asked our friends who were actually studying UI UX. So we asked them what it was like and how it worked. And based on that, we realized, at least I realized, that I really enjoyed it. And I wanted to do more of it. I wanted to experiment more. And so that's how I slowly sort of started experimenting with more and more college projects that I did. I started experimenting with designing more and more apps there. And finally, when college ended, I decided to make an entire career out of it. So it started with a small thing, and now, like I said, it's been like years.
It all starts with an exposure, right?
Yeah.
I decided to do an MBA because I was exposed to the world of business, right? So I think you need to expose yourself to different things so that you decide. Anyway, I see people leaving, so I think we are pretty much over time. So guys, yeah, in case of future questions, do send us an email at contact@softclay.in or reply to the WhatsApp that you've gotten from our team. Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Shreya, for taking out the time and giving all the answers that we've been asking you.
Yeah.
Spot. And yeah, if we have more questions from our students, we might come back to you and ask for
No
that.
problem. I'll be happy to help. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Shreya. Take care. Bye.
Bye.